At a roadside diner baking under a June sun, a former Navy SEAL sat alone, eating because stopping felt worse. From a shadowed alley stepped a German shepherd and 4 wobbling puppies, eyes cautious, hope rationed. Minutes earlier, they'd been chased, sprayed, laughed at. When the SEAL slid his only meal onto the ground, the town scoffed. He didn't look up. He saw himself after the war, surviving for someone smaller. What followed would uncover hidden cruelty, unite a quiet town, and turn a broken soldier into a guardian again. If you believe rescue works both ways, stay with us. And subscribe. June settled over Willowbrook like a weight that refused to lift. By noon, the lakeside town shimmered under a merciless sun, heat radiating off asphalt and metal until the air itself seemed to waver. Cicadas buzzed from cottonwood trees lining Main Street, their sound mixing with distant boat engines and the occasional clang of a screen door from nearby shops. The smell of frying oil, warm dust, and lake water hung thick and unmoving. At the corner of Main and Alder, a narrow sidewalk diner survived on habit more than profit. Its umbrella, once bright red and white, had faded into tired pink stripes. The metal tables wobbled and the vinyl chairs sighed whenever someone shifted. This was where Cole Merritt sat alone. Cole was 29, tall and powerfully built, the kind of physique shaped by discipline rather than comfort. His shoulders were broad, his arms roped with lean muscle, but there was a heaviness to him that had nothing to do with weight. His dark hair was cropped short, no longer regulation but still precise, and a faint shadow of stubble darkened his jaw. His steel blue eyes were alert yet distant, as if part of him was always listening for something no one else could hear. People in Willowbrook recognized him. Some knew his name. Most just knew the label. Former Navy SEAL. He had come back quieter than he'd left, rented the old cabin near the tree line, and kept to himself. He spoke politely when spoken to, paid his bills on time, and avoided questions about where he'd been or what he'd lost. Cole ate mechanically, barely tasting the food in front of him. Nights were worse. Fragmented sleep, sharp dreams that dropped him back into sand and smoke. But daylight brought its own emptiness. During the day, no one expected him to be whole. He could sit, eat, exist, and that seemed to be enough for the world. A sudden burst of raised voices cut through the hum of the street. Cole's gaze shifted toward the alley beside the diner, where a dented trash can leaned against a brick wall. From the narrow strip of shade there, movement emerged. Slow, cautious. A German shepherd stepped into view. She was painfully thin, ribs faintly visible beneath a dull, sun-bleached coat. One ear stood upright, while the other bent awkwardly at the tip, marked by an old scar. Her tail stayed low, sweeping once in uncertainty. She paused, scanning the tables, calculating distances and reactions. Then 4 smaller shapes followed. The puppies were very young, still unsteady, but old enough to walk. Their legs trembled as they moved, paws oversized for their bodies, bellies tucked tight from hunger. Dust clung to their fur, and their tongues lolled as they panted in the heat. They pressed close to the shepherd's legs, bumping into one another, instinctively forming a clumsy knot of warmth and protection. Cole had already seen them try. Earlier, the shepherd had approached a man eating fries 2 tables over. The man had jerked his chair back and shouted, nearly knocking it over. She'd retreated at once, turning sideways to shield the puppies. A woman in oversized sunglasses had sprayed water from her bottle, yelling about fleas and filth. A pair of teenagers had laughed, tossing napkins and making barking noises. The shepherd had learned quickly. Approach, gauge, withdraw, protect. Now her eyes settled on Cole. They weren't pleading. They were steady, guarded, and exhausted. The look of a creature doing careful math with too few options left. Cole felt something tighten in his chest. He'd seen that look before. in teammates running on fumes, in reflections he avoided when the house went quiet. It was the look of someone who kept moving not because they believed in the outcome, but because stopping wasn't an option. He glanced down at his plate. The food was still hot, still more than he needed. Without drawing attention to himself, Cole pushed the plate toward the edge of the table. He tore a piece of meat into smaller portions and placed them carefully on a napkin on the ground, leaving space between himself and the offering. His movements were deliberate, non-threatening. Instinctive habits from a life where sudden gestures could mean danger. The shepherd hesitated only a moment. She stepped forward, took a piece gently, then backed away and nudged it toward the puppies. They ate with frantic, inefficient enthusiasm, tails wagging weakly as they chewed. Around Cole, the reactions came quickly. A man near the window snorted. "You kidding me?" Another voice followed, louder. "That's how you end up with strays hanging around?" Someone laughed, sharp and uncomfortable. "Guess the war really messed him up." Cole heard them all. He didn't respond. His attention stayed on the dog, who watched him again between bites, alert for any sign that the kindness might vanish as quickly as it appeared. He tore the rest of the meat, then the bread, then slid the plate itself forward. The laughter faded into murmurs. People didn't like being reminded of what they'd chosen not to do. The heat pressed down harder, sweat gathering at Cole's temples. He felt exposed, sitting there under the open sky with strangers' judgment washing over him. But beneath it was something steadier, an old, familiar sense of purpose so simple it almost startled him. When the plate was empty, the shepherd didn't leave. She sat, the puppies clustered against her legs, and looked at Cole. Not at the food, but at him. For a long moment, neither moved. The street noise dulled, replaced by the slow thud of Cole's heartbeat. Flashes of memory surfaced. Long patrols under unforgiving sun, teammates huddled close, decisions made quickly because hesitation cost lives. Cole pushed his chair back and stood. Conversations around him faltered. A few people watched openly now. He picked up the small paper bag holding his napkins and receipt, then paused. Slowly, he crouched and extended, his hand palm up and low, careful not to reach for the dog's head. The shepherd didn't approach, but she didn't retreat either. Her body stayed tense, ready to move if needed. "All right," Cole murmured, his voice rough from lack of use. "Come on." He turned and walked toward the side street leading away from Main, toward the quieter stretch that ran along the trees. After a few steps, he glanced back. The shepherd rose. The puppies scrambled after her. No one stopped them. No one apologized. The heat swallowed their footsteps as they disappeared from view. Across town, near the edge of Willowbrook's modest commercial strip, Nora Hale eased her aging sedan into the shade of a sycamore tree. She was in her early 30s, with sun-streaked brown hair pulled into a practical knot and clear, observant eyes that missed very little. Her scrubs were clean but faded, and her posture carried the quiet confidence of someone used to responsibility. Inside her small veterinary clinic earlier that morning, a call had come in. Another report of dogs being chased away near the market. Nora had listened carefully, jaw tightening. Strays with puppies didn't just appear by accident. Someone had failed them long before they reached the street. Now she walked the cracked sidewalks near the market, scanning for overturned trash, paw prints, anything. But the midday heat and breeze had erased most signs. Dust blurred what little remained. Nora shaded her eyes and looked down the street, unease settling in her chest. She checked her watch. "I'll come back tonight," she said quietly. "When it cools." Somewhere nearby, a man and a dog were already moving away from the heat, drawn together by a thread neither yet understood. The road narrowed as it left the last storefronts behind, trading pavement for packed dirt and pine needles. Cole guided the small procession along the shoulder, keeping his pace measured so the puppies could follow. The forest closed in quickly. tall pines filtering the sun into bands of gold and shadow, and the air cooled by degrees the moment the trees thickened. His cabin sat back from the road, a modest one-room structure with a shallow porch and a roof patched more times than he could remember. Weathered cedar boards bore the marks of long winters and quiet summers. It wasn't much, but it was his. He unlocked the door and stepped aside, giving the shepherd room to decide. She paused at the threshold, nose working, ears flicking at the unfamiliar scents. Then she moved in, the puppies tumbling after her. Cole set about the practical work first. He filled bowls with water and poured out what food he had left. Supplementing it with eggs, he scrambled quickly on the small stove. He laid old towels near the sink and coaxed the shepherd closer, speaking low and steady. When she finally allowed him to guide her to the basin, he worked carefully, rinsing dust and grime from her coat. As the water ran clear, the damage became visible. There were cuts along her flank, some recent and angry, others pale and healed into uneven lines. A thick scar circled her neck where a chain had once rubbed too tight. She never snapped, never growled. Only watched him with a guarded patience that felt earned the hard way. Cole's hand slowed. He'd seen wounds like these before, inflicted not by accident, but by intent. He finished the rinse, wrapped her in a towel, and sat back on his heels, jaw tight. The puppies went next, one by one, squeaking indignantly until they were dry and huddled together in a wobbling heap. Cole smiled despite himself. He set up a low box lined with blankets near the window where the light was softer. When the shepherd settled beside it, the puppies pressed into her warmth, their breathing evening out. He sat on the floor across from them, thinking. Names came unbidden, as if they'd been waiting. The shepherd lifted her head when he spoke the first one. "Marlowe," he said quietly. It fit the steadiness in her eyes, the stubborn line of her jaw. The smallest puppy, fern-colored and delicate, earned Fern. The ash-gray one with a solemn stare became Ash. The curious pup that kept nosing at everything was Scout. The last, thick-pawed and forever tipping over, he called Timber. Outside, a pickup rolled past and slowed. Voices drifted through the trees. "Did you see it?" a woman asked, sharp with interest. "5 of 'em," a man replied. He brought 'em home. Cole recognized the neighbors by sound, if not by sight. Doris Klein, late 60s, hair always pinned into a neat silver roll, lived 2 cabins down and treated news like currency. Her companion, Ray Whitaker, a retired mill worker with a stoop and a permanent scowl, had opinions about everything and patience for little. They lingered just long enough to make their presence felt. "Strays," Doris said. "That's trouble." "Figures," Ray muttered. "Man keeps to himself, then this." The engine revved and moved on. Cole exhaled slowly. The words found old places inside him, places already tender. He stood and closed the window, then returned to the floor. Marlowe watched him with an intensity that felt less like judgment and more like recognition. When he met her gaze, something eased. He wasn't fixing everything. He was doing this one thing. Late afternoon stretched into early evening. The light softened, cicadas giving way to birdsong. Cole cleaned the small kitchen, then stepped onto the porch to sit with his back against the doorframe. He let the quiet settle, the forest breathing around him. From inside came the soft sounds of puppies shifting, a mother's low huff as she resettled. Down the road, a sedan slowed and pulled to the shoulder. Nora Hale stepped out, scanning the tree line. She wore worn sneakers and faded scrubs beneath a light jacket, her brown hair pulled back in a practical knot. Her posture was alert without being tense, the look of someone accustomed to approaching the unknown with care. She'd heard the talk at the market, whispers traveling faster than facts. A former SEAL, a pack of dogs. It didn't take much imagination to connect the dots with the reports she'd received. Nora followed the dirt path until the cabin came into view. She stopped at the edge of the yard and raised a hand, careful not to startle. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she called. "I'm a veterinarian." Cole stood, assessing her in the way he assessed everything: stance, tone, distance. He nodded once and stepped down from the porch. She introduced herself, voice calm, eyes warm but professional. "I heard there was a shepherd with puppies. I was hoping to check her over." Cole hesitated. Trust didn't come easily. Still, the evidence of Marlowe's injuries sat heavy on his mind. He opened the door wider and stepped aside. Nora moved slowly, letting the shepherd read her. She crouched near the box, speaking softly as she examined the cuts with practiced hands. "These aren't from the road," she said after a moment. "Some are fresh, others are older." She glanced up at Cole, reading his face. "You did the right thing." The words landed with more weight than he expected. He nodded once, then found himself talking, halting at first, then steadier. About the diner. About the way Marlowe had stood between her puppies and the world. Nora listened without interrupting, offering advice when needed, showing him how to clean and dress the worst of the wounds with what he had on hand. When she finished, she stood and brushed pine needles from her knee. "I'll bring proper supplies tomorrow," she said, "and food for the pups." Cole walked her to the porch. The sky had turned lavender, the first stars pricking through. For a moment, neither spoke. "Thank you," he said finally. Nora smiled, small and sincere. "You're not alone out here." She left him with the quiet again. Cole watched her taillights fade, then turned back inside. Marlowe lifted her head. Their eyes met, and this time she didn't look away. Dusk slid into Willowbrook with a hush that felt deliberate. The heat loosened its grip as the sun dipped behind the pines, and the forest breathed out a cooler air that carried resin and damp earth. Cole moved through the familiar motions of evening, measuring food, setting bowls, counting heads without thinking. The puppies pressed close, impatient and clumsy, while Marlowe lingered at the edge of the yard, ears tracking the quiet. Nora's findings weighed on him. The marks around Marlowe's neck hadn't been accidental. Rope burn left a signature, tight, repeated contact that told a story of restraint. The deeper scars along her flank suggested confinement, the kind that forced muscle against metal or wood. It was the pattern, not the pain, that bothered Cole most. Patterns meant intention. He set the last bowl down and stepped back. Marlowe ate quickly, then lifted her head, eyes fixed on the tree line. A low growl rose from her chest, controlled, warning. The puppies froze, instinct recognizing danger even if they didn't understand it. Headlights moved where headlights shouldn't. A pickup rolled past the cabin at a crawl, paint the color of moss and rain-soaked bark. Its rear plate was smeared with mud, thick enough to blur the numbers. The engine note dipped as if the driver eased off the gas to listen. Cole didn't reach for anything. He stood still, breath measured, watching through the screen of branches. The truck continued a short distance, then idled. Marlowe barked, sharp and sudden, then went silent, body angled toward the puppies. The truck crept on. Cole waited until the sound faded, then crouched to calm the pups with a hand on the ground between them. He watched the dust settle. When the night finally claimed the road, he slipped on boots and took a flashlight, leaving the cabin dark. The tire tracks were easy to read where the dirt softened near the bend. Fresh impressions. Heavy load. He followed them into the trees, moving wide of the path, letting his eyes do the work. The forest floor opened into a rough clearing not far from the creek. Old hardware lay scattered there, half hidden by leaves, bent cage doors with broken latches, lengths of rope stiff with grime, shallow bowls crusted with something that smelled sour. A makeshift operation, abandoned in a hurry, or used sparingly to avoid notice. Cole knelt, touching nothing. He mapped the scene in his head, the approach, the exits, the way the ground sloped toward the water. This wasn't a one-time trespass. It was a routine. Someone knew the area well enough to return and confident enough to linger. He backed away the same way he'd come, erasing his steps where he could. At the cabin, Marlowe met him with a steady stare. He closed the door and set a chair under the handle. The night passed in pieces. Morning brought Nora back with supplies. She worked quietly, rechecking Marlowe's wounds with a gentleness that didn't ask permission. Cole told her about the truck and the clearing, keeping his voice even. "That explains the injuries," Nora said. "And the disappearances." She sat back on her heels, studying his face. "You're carrying a lot of vigilance," she added softly. "All the time," Cole shrugged. "Keeps people alive." "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes it just keeps the body from resting." She didn't push. Instead, she showed him how to reinforce the dressings and left a list of signs to watch for. Fever, swelling, changes in appetite. Before she left, she hesitated. "My cousin is the police chief," she said. "Ben Carter. I'll talk to him." Ben Carter met them later that afternoon at the edge of town. He was built like a former linebacker. Broad through the chest, hair cropped close, a weathered calm to his expression. His uniform fit neatly, badge catching the light. When he listened, he did it with his whole body, leaning in just enough to signal attention. "We've had reports," Ben said. "Cats, small dogs, nothing solid to tie it together." He glanced at Cole. "You found equipment?" Cole described the clearing, the tracks, the timing. Ben nodded slowly. "We'll take a look, quietly." As they parted, Ben added, "If you see that truck again, don't follow it alone." Cole met his gaze. "I won't be reckless." Ben smiled thinly. "I didn't say reckless." That evening, the forest fell quiet again. Cole fed the pups early and sat on the porch, listening. Nora had left a pamphlet behind by accident. Breathing exercises, grounding techniques. He read it once, then folded it and put it away. He didn't need instructions to know when his pulse spiked. He needed to choose what to do with it. Marlowe stiffened. The truck returned, headlights masked, engine whispering. It slowed near the drive, then accelerated, throwing gravel. Cole waited a full minute before moving. He tracked the sound until it cut toward the creek road, then took a different route through the trees, staying downwind. The tracks led him back to the clearing. A figure had been there recently. The rope shifted, a cage door moved. Cole memorized everything and withdrew. At the cabin, he secured the yard and sat on the floor with the dogs until the night settled. He didn't sleep much. At dawn, he made a decision that felt older than words. Whatever was hunting the edges of Willowbrook would not take Marlowe or her pups. Not from this ground. The storm didn't announce itself politely. It arrived like a slammed door. Wind rushed through Willowbrook, bending the tops of the pines until they groaned, and the air thickened with ozone. Thunder rolled low and continuous, not sharp cracks, but a long, vibrating warning that made the cabin windows tremble. Then the power went out. The lights died mid-flicker, plunging the house into a warm, suffocating dark. The sudden silence of appliances was replaced by the frantic yipping of the puppies. Ash, Fern, Scout, and Timber scrambled over each other, claws skittering on the floor, their small bodies driven by blind panic. Marlowe bolted upright, ears flat, chest heaving. Cole moved before he thought. He grabbed the flashlight from the counter and swept the beam across the room, grounding the puppies with his voice. His tone was calm, measured, the same cadence he used to steady men younger than him in places where fear was lethal. "It's all right. Stay." The beam caught Marlowe at the open back door. She had pushed it ajar with her nose. Rain blew in, warm and heavy, soaking the threshold. Her head was low, nostrils flaring, reading something the human senses couldn't. Then she was gone, out into the yard, swallowed by rain and darkness. "Marlowe!" Cole snapped, already moving. He stepped into the storm, boots sinking into mud. The flashlight cut a narrow tunnel through the rain. Thunder cracked overhead, and for a split second the forest lit up in harsh white, every trunk and branch frozen like a photograph. That was when he saw the shape moving between the trees. A man, tall, lean, dressed in dark clothes, soaked to near black. He moved sideways through the forest, keeping low, his steps careful, practiced. In his right hand dangled a length of rope fashioned into a loop, a snare. Cole's jaw tightened. His pulse surged, hot and electric, not fear but focus. He ran. The ground fought him. Roots grabbed at his boots. Wet leaves turned solid footing into traps. He kept the beam trained ahead, tracking motion rather than form. The man glanced back once, eyes catching the light, then veered sharply downhill toward the creek. Cole followed, breath steady, shoulders burning. He wasn't in uniform anymore. No radio, no backup, no authority in the woods beyond his own will. But the training didn't evaporate with discharge papers. It lived in his muscles, in the way he adjusted his stride, in the way he read terrain as an ally or an enemy. Lightning split the sky. In the flash, Marlowe appeared between them. She stood rigid on a rise, rain plastering her fur flat against her ribs. When the light vanished, she lunged, not at the man, but across his path, cutting him off for a heartbeat that felt impossibly long. The man cursed and swung the rope. Marlowe skidded back, avoiding it by inches, but the sound that tore from her throat wasn't anger. It was recognition. The man hesitated. That was his mistake. Cole closed the distance and tackled him. They hit the ground hard, sliding through wet leaves. The man was fast, wiry, and strong in a way that came from repetition, not discipline. He elbowed free and scrambled up, sprinting again, this time deeper into the trees where the ground rose steeply and uneven. Cole chased until his lungs burned and the forest swallowed the sound of retreat. The man vanished into the storm like smoke. All that remained was the cage. It lay on its side near a fallen log. Steel bars bent and twisted, the door warped from forced entry or desperate escape. Rain pooled inside it, filling it like a trough. Cole stood over it, chest heaving, rain streaming down his face. He felt Marlowe beside him before he saw her. She was trembling, not from cold, but from something older. When lightning lit her face again, her eyes reflected terror layered with resolve, as if memory itself had teeth. "You know him?" Cole murmured, more statement than question. Marlowe pressed closer, leaning her weight against his leg. It was a gesture of trust so complete it hollowed him out. He switched off the flashlight and rested his forehead briefly against hers, letting the storm cover the moment. They returned to the cabin soaked and shaking. Cole dried the puppies with towels, hands gentle but efficient, while Marlowe paced until every door was locked and every corner checked. Only then did she settle, lying with her body curved protectively around the pups. Another knock came, sharp against the thunder. Cole opened the door to find Nora standing on the porch, rain plastering her dark hair to her cheeks. She wore a weathered green jacket over scrubs, her boots caked with mud, her expression tight with concern and stubborn resolve. Nora Hale was not tall, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence, shoulders squared as if the world rarely pushed her off balance. "I saw the lights go out," she said, "and then the storm. I thought—" "You came anyway," Cole finished, stepping aside. Inside, the storm sounded farther away. Nora knelt by the puppies, speaking softly, her presence steadying them almost as much as Marlowe's. She checked Marlowe's neck where the rope had nearly caught, fingers careful, professional. "That wasn't a stray," Nora said quietly. He knew what he was doing. Cole nodded. He knew her. Nora looked up at him then, really looked. The storm outside mirrored something in his eyes. Old battles still echoing. She didn't reach for him. She just sat on the floor across from him, rain dripping from her sleeves. "I grew up during hurricanes," she said after a moment. "You learn the difference between noise and danger. Some storms pass, some change the land." Cole stared at the floorboards. "I thought I left that part of me behind." Nora shook her head. "You didn't leave it. You survived it. That's different." Thunder rolled again, but softer now, retreating. The puppies slept, piled together, breathing in unison. Marlowe watched Cole, her gaze no longer guarded, only certain. When the rain finally eased, the house felt smaller, warmer, held together by something unseen, but solid. Cole locked the last window and leaned against the door, listening to the quiet that followed the storm. Whatever hunted in the dark had shown its hand, and he would not let it take his pack. The summer air had finally settled into a gentle rhythm. Crickets stitched their song through the evenings, and the lake lay smooth as dark glass beneath the stars. Cole worked quietly, mounting the last of the motion cameras along the tree line. He chose angles with care. No wasted coverage, no blind spots, thinking in arcs and funnels the way he always had. Marlowe watched him from the porch, head tilted, eyes alert but calm, as if she understood the purpose behind the small black boxes. The nights passed without incident. Then, on the third clear evening, the alert came. Cole's phone vibrated softly in his palm. He stepped inside and watched the feed load. A face filled the screen. Sharp cheekbones, a thin scar cutting through one eyebrow, eyes that darted with practiced calculation. The man paused beneath the pines, lifting his gaze as if he sensed being watched. In the stillness, his features were unmistakable. Cole exhaled slowly. This wasn't a local drifter. He recognized the type, a man who knew how to vanish across county lines. He drove straight to the station at first light. Chief Ben Carter listened without interrupting, his broad shoulders squared, jaw set. Ben was a man who spoke plainly and moved decisively, his calm authority earned through years of small-town crises and the occasional big one. When Cole finished, Ben leaned back and folded his arms. "That's him," Ben said. "Name's Travis Rourke. Wanted across the state line for operating an illegal breeding and fighting ring. He's slipped 2 warrants already." Ben assembled a small team before noon. No sirens, no fanfare, just quiet preparation. Nora arrived with a backpack slung over one shoulder, hair pulled back, eyes steady. She met Cole's gaze and nodded once. No words were needed. They moved at dusk. Marlowe led them, not with panic, but with purpose. She tracked a path along the creek, then cut toward the old logging road, nose low, tail steady. The air carried the clean smell of pine and warm earth. Ahead, a figure broke from the shadows and ran. The chase was short. Ben's team closed the exits while Cole and Nora flanked left. Rourke bolted toward the water, slipping on stones slick with algae. Marlowe surged forward, barking sharp and commanding, driving him off balance. Ben tackled him cleanly, pinning him before he could scramble up again. The cuffs clicked shut, metal on skin, final and certain. Rourke spat curses into the dirt. "You got no idea what you're ruining?" Ben hauled him upright. "We know exactly what we're ending." The search that followed unfolded like a grim inventory. Hidden cages buried beneath tarps, records detailing sales across counties. Animals, dogs and cats both, emaciated but alive, blinking into freedom. When the transport vans arrived, Nora moved among the rescued creatures with quiet efficiency, hands gentle, voice low. Marlowe stood at her side, watching each gate close, each life carried away to safety. The charges stacked quickly: animal cruelty, illegal confinement, interstate trafficking. Weeks later, the sentence came down in county court: 12 years without parole, assets seized, properties forfeited. The illegal operation was dismantled entirely, its reach cut clean. Summer deepened, then softened. Marlowe's coat filled out, the dullness replaced by a rich sheen. Ash, fern, scout, and timber grew strong and curious, their clumsy energy turning the yard into a blur of paws and laughter. Cole signed the adoption papers without hesitation, his name steady on the line. With Nora's help and Ben's quiet encouragement, the idea took shape. A training yard. Not a business, not a spectacle. A place for veterans and dogs to learn each other again. The townspeople surprised him. The same neighbors who had once watched with folded arms now arrived with lumber, wire, and hands ready to work. Old jokes fell away, replaced by shared meals and easy smiles. On the final morning of summer, the lake caught the dawn and scattered it into gold. Cole stood at the water's edge with Nora beside him, her sleeves rolled up, hair catching the light. She smiled. Small, genuine. "You did this," she said. "We did," Cole answered, and meant it. Behind them, the puppies raced through the grass, tumbling over each other in a mess of joy. Marlowe settled at Cole's feet, resting her head against his boot. Her eyes were soft now, unguarded, reflecting a peace she had earned. The town woke slowly around them. A breeze moved across the lake, carrying the promise of what comes next. Cole felt the quiet settle inside his chest, not empty, not heavy. Just right. Summer had begun with hunger and scorn. It ended with a home, a community, and a future wide enough to breathe. Some summers arrive with heat and judgment, with hunger and fear pressed close to the heart. And yet, even then, healing often begins in the smallest moments. An offered meal, a hand that doesn't pull away, a choice to protect when it would be easier to turn aside. In everyday life, we all meet our own versions of Marlowe and Cole. We see the wounded, the misunderstood, the ones pushed to the margins. Sometimes we are them. This story reminds us that strength is not loud and courage is not perfect. It lives in patience, inconsistency, and in the decision to care again after loss. When we stand up for those who cannot speak, when we refuse to look away from cruelty, we don't just change their future, we quietly rebuild our own. One act of kindness can reshape a neighborhood. One choice to help can restore a sense of purpose that seemed lost forever. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need a reminder that hope can return even after the hardest season. Leave a comment and tell us what part of the journey touched you most. And if you believe in second chances, quiet bravery, and the healing bond between humans and animals, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story. Sometimes the light finds us when we choose to protect something smaller than ourselves.